Good morning, and thank you once again for joining me on Voluntary Virtues. This is the conversation with Kelly Diamond, and you can catch me every Thursday at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Time, 9:30 Eastern. You can also catch my written word every Monday at globalwealthprotection.com. So, of course, a week goes by, and I'm living and breathing on my little Facebook page, and I kind of noticed a pattern. There's a couple of things I've noticed, but I've noticed a pattern of anytime we engage in a conversation with, somebody who believes we should have some form of government. Okay, we need some form of government. It basically regresses into what I've entitled this episode as, and what I like to call Gotcha-ism, right? Um, so anytime the government does something and provides a service of any sort, such as it is, and I use the term loosely because I'm not actually on the receiving end of most of these services. But nonetheless, I hear they exist, and I hear that people use them, and I hear it helps people. This is completely on hearsay because I don't feel helped by the government at all. But nonetheless, there's this gotcha-ism. You use the roads, right? Gotcha. You need the state. And I was like, but the roads didn't need the state to exist, right? If I were to remove the government from the equation of our day-to-day lives and in society, there would be other means by which shit would get done. And I say this because people are looking for better ways to get things done. I think a prime example was when there was the BP spill, and it was on. I think BP rents or leases land from the United States, and part of that land is in the Gulf of Mexico. And BP had the oil spill, and of course, the United States government is trying to figure out how to contain it. Right. In the meantime, you had, and okay, for better or for worse, never mind the source that I saw this on Fox News, but nonetheless, and never mind the fact that I saw it on Hannity, totally incriminating. But Sean Hannity was interviewing people who had various innovations on how to handle the oil spill. He had all these inventions and had all these various processes by which they could. Like one guy had a thing. I thought it was fascinating. One guy had a thing where by pouring this powder over this area where the spill was, it would congeal the oil into these globs, which made it easier to just remove it. It would literally just take the oil up and collect it into these globs, and you could just, I don't know if you could pick it up, but you could certainly almost scoop it out and get it out of the water. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of cool. Another one was like it created a film and separated it from the water. You could just almost wipe the surface of the water. I'm not. I'm certainly not the scientist who would be able to explain it better, or explain it well. But I was physically, my eyes were watching what they were doing with oil on water. They took like gasoline, they took unrefined oil. They had samples, and they would pour it into the water, into a small test water, and just show what it would do. And I'm thinking, it can't be worse. These were all non-toxic. These methods were all non-toxic, which is even more amazing. So I didn't think we could be any worse off, right? I mean, you can't be worse off if you're using a non-toxic solution for a toxic situation. And I thought, that's really amazing. I'm really impressed. And I think there were countless people who were submitting their ideas to this, to the federal government to see if they could try their idea. I'm thinking, dude, just let them run, swim the beaches. But just take the yellow tape off and let them go. If they want to go there and they want to try and fix it, it can't be worse than the amount of gallons of oil that was being dumped into the Gulf of Mexico every day for over a month. right? I mean, is it worse? Could it possibly? No, it can't. So, I was wondering why they couldn't go. Well, as it turns out, there's all this paperwork that needs to be submitted, and all this red tape. And so I have to ask, if government is the solution, where was their solution and why did it take over a month for them to address it? Right? In a moment of crisis, the government's never ready. But it's prepared to create crisis. It has its little, we're its lab. Right? Open society is the government's lab, and then it's willing to create certain crises and then try to fix it and then tell you how much you need them. But when a real crisis occurs, when real emergencies happen, BP oil spill being one of them, Katrina being another one, it seems the United States gets flummoxed, local governments get flummoxed, state governments get flummoxed, and nobody knows how to solve the problem. Right? So in the end, if I were ever, the government, if I'm to say, is there a time or a place where you would need government? No more than I would need an insurance policy. I need something to clutch up when shit goes down, right? And the government isn't that. It's demonstrated that much. So when people say, and I've been told several times that my taxes pay for services that I use. Taxpayers pay money into the system, and then they use that system in some way. And I'm thinking, but I don't have a choice, right? The roads being a perfect example, and of course being the first resort to refute any sort of statelessness is, what about the roads? And I feel like of all the things the government provides, the roads are like the shittiest local services possible next to public schools, right? I don't use California public. I'm in California. I don't use California public schools, but I pay for them. I used California public schools because my parents enrolled me in them, but they paid for it with their property taxes. So I'm not paying back now. If that were true, if we're relied upon to reimburse the state for all the things such as public schools and roads and parks and libraries that we were compelled to use by our parents when we were younger, if we're meant to pay them back, then by all means don't let your residents go to other states because they still have a debt to you, right? Alternatively, tax dollars pay as we go, and so I'm not in debt to the state of California anymore. My parents were paying my tab when I was growing up, and so now I'm free and clear to come and go as I please from the United States, at least from the state of California, the People's Republic of California, right? I should be able to come and go. But this idea that, the way, especially, for as much as I don't agree with him on many things, Ben Carson is trying to trying to make a run for presidency, and as a conservative, he's railing against all these programs that, of course, the Democrats strongly defend, and he's caught up in a web of Gotcha-ism because he attended public schools, got some sort of public assistance while growing up, was, I guess, a benefactor of affirmative action. And I have to say, in his defense, that while we can disagree on policy, that type of Gotcha-ism doesn't apply to a child who had no choice but to follow wherever the mom and dad put them, right? If my parents put me in public school, it wasn't like I chose to go there. If the state has a monopoly on education, and my parents had a monopoly over all life decisions up to the age of 18. So anything I got as a child from the state is certainly not my doing, and certainly wasn't me deliberately going and trying to get state aid. Never mind the fact that it's illegal not to put me in school. right? I mean, there's truancy issues. You can homeschool, but you have to sign up for that. You can't just not send your kid to school. There's protocols involved. So yeah, while you can homeschool, not that my parents were ever going to do that, but certainly if they were, if that was a viable option at the time, they can't just not send me to school. There's protocols. You need a permit, so to speak. You need to sign up for that and you register for that and all that, so that the state knows not to expect your child at school because you're homeschooling, right? And this idea that the government provides these things not because I ordered them or asked for them, but because there might be some people who do want them and can't afford them, so we're all going to collectively throw in for these things. That's not, I mean, to impose that on me and not even give me an option to opt out, to let me know for myself whether or not I really need the government or not, demonstrates that this is not about, my hypocrisy as much as it is the government's monopoly, right? I would like to be able to check off and say, I do or I don't want this service, and then be billed accordingly. The problem is that if you have money, right, if you're living above the poverty level, you're just living above the poverty level, you're the one who could probably afford to do more on your own and be more self-sufficient, right? If you're making choices that don't put you, that if you're making choices that don't encumber you in any way and you're responsible with your money, then perhaps you don't need the services that the government just throws at you as a package deal. You can't extrapolate public education from all the regulations, because I'm not even allowed to say no to the regulations. I'm not even allowed to say, you know what, I'd like you to deregulate some of this crap. Well, no, this is for your own good and for your own safety. I'm doing this for you. Look at all the diseases you haven't caught, right? Look at all the jobs that didn't get lost. Look at all the jihadists that didn't come over and steal your liberty. Look at all the things that didn't happen. That's the ultimate Gotcha-ism, isn't it? When we're meant to analyze and be thankful or be grateful for the fact that something didn't happen. It's not always that you can't prove that. Obviously, if a child is standing in the middle of the road and a bus is coming and somebody comes and pushes the kid out of the way, we can safely assume that the child was not hit by the bus because of that person, right? But we see the bus, we see where the kid is. This is all visually accessible. You can deduce that the child was not hit by the bus, would have been hit by the bus had that person not pushed them out of the way. And they were not hit by the bus because that person pushed them out of the way. Okay? So there is that. It's not to say that you can never prove that something didn't happen because somebody did something. Right? But in the case of the government is telling me, and its apologists are telling me, that if they weren't here, I would never have any of the things that we have now. I wouldn't have, there would be no schools. Nobody would be educated. Everybody would just be stupid. Right? Never mind the fact that parents are already passing on their education to their children long before they hit a kindergarten. My daughter, by the age of 5, already knew her alphabet and was starting to write and starting to read before she ever hit kindergarten. Right? She was already counting. She already knew her colors. She knew very basic things, but she knew it all before she went to school. Simply because she knew how to talk, she knew how to communicate, she knew what things were, she could ask for things. She was already fairly well educated by 5 in terms of basic abilities. So obviously, without a school, could we rely on parents to teach their kids what's necessary? In the age of information where the internet has all information at your fingertips, can we rely on the fact that just the access to that information is enough to where we could have that information meet up with people who don't have it yet? And do you think that we can make that happen? Or, yeah, I mean, are we really that incompetent? The same people who have privately paved parking lots on private property, can those same people perhaps pave a path between that property and another piece of property? You know, I mean, and the other, the other side of Gotcha-ism is not just on the individual who goes about their life and incidentally ends up using various government things and services, right? It's not just that. We do it with businesses as well. Well, you know, this business is partnering with the state and the city to do X, Y, and Z. And I have to wonder if perhaps there isn't like a Ron Paul position on that. You know, when Ron, and just to give you an idea, when Ron Paul was questioned about earmarking, it was an interesting thing. I've heard him say it several different times on several outlets. He was called out for his earmarking because he's one of the bigger earmarkers, you know, when he was in Congress. And they asked him, "Do you earmark?" He says, "Oh yeah, yeah, a lot. I'm one of the top people I'm one of the top earmarkers in Congress." But I thought you believed in fiscal responsibility, blah 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 blah, right? And he says, and he explains it. And he says, "Look, if I don't earmark the money, that doesn't mean the money doesn't get spent. It just gets spent somewhere else. I'm all for," he explains how he's all for fiscal responsibility, but you can't be fiscally responsible if you're already committed to spending. Okay? So he says, if the money is going to be spent, then it might as well be spent on my district. Because if I don't earmark it, it'll just get spent on somebody else's district. The money wasn't saved because I didn't earmark. Okay? But what I do is that I earmark the crap out of this bill, and then I vote against it. And I thought, wow, that's really clever, right? But the understanding is that this was going to happen anyway. So the question is am I going to benefit from something that's already going to happen or not? Am I going to do, if this bill passes, at least my district will get something. If this bill doesn't pass, then it really doesn't matter that I earmarked it because I'm going to vote against it anyway. Right? And I think to myself that's probably one of the more pragmatic approaches to the state, especially when you're as close to it as Ron Paul was. That if you're a business trying to operate in the United States, how much of your ethics and how much of your decision making do you really have control over? Especially when you're first establishing yourself, right? Let's say there's no Target here right now, but there is a clear sign that says commercial land for sale, 4 acres or something, and Target sees that and says, oh, we'll just buy the 4 acres, right? So Target can't just go buy the 4 acres and start building. That's not the way it works. And I think we all kind of know that if you're going to build something, where do you got to go? You have to go to the city. You have to ask for permission to build, right? And then not only do you need permits to build, you need permits to run plumbing and electricity. You need separate permits for that. You need inspections. You need all that. And you need to clear it with the city to make sure that you're zoned. There is no way around that. Okay? Small or big business, whether you're Target or you're, Kelly's Cookie Shop, if you're going to build something, especially a commercial business as opposed to a residence, there are several protocols through which we're all beholden to go through if we plan to keep that. Right? So first, Target says Target says I would like to buy this land, but first I need to make sure that I can actually build my business on it, because otherwise there's no point in me just having 4 acres in the middle of wherever, right? Indio, wherever. But so first things first, Target has a representative go over to the city of Indio and say, hey, I want to build Target. We want to build one of our locations on that plot of land. If I buy that land, can I build it there? So the city has its own rules, right? And each city has its own set of rules. I mean, it's a matrix of nonsense. And they say, well, any number of things they can say. They can say, well, yeah, that's plenty of space. You could do that. Just you have to fill out the paperwork, get your permit, blah, blah, blah. Send you on your way, right? So that could happen. Ostensibly, everything is kosher and everything, all the specs that Target brings to the city are approved for that land, and everything's fine, and all they got to do is get their permit. It's all perfunctory, and they're off to build it. That could be one possibility. The other possibility is that the city says, well, given your specs, not all of it is necessarily zoned for commercial use. In order for you to be compliant with our rules, you need a certain number of feet or yards between you and this residential area, and you and this, and you and this. So you need that space, plus you have to have enough space to build what it is you've got here. So when all's said and done, in order for you to do it, you can't just build on 4.5 acres of land. You need 6 acres of land, say. Well, 6 acres of land isn't for sale, only the 4.5. So if I'm not clear to build there, then I won't do it. And the city hears this as a threat. The city says, wait, we can make something work here. Let's not be hasty. And the city doesn't want Target to not build. Why doesn't the city not want Target to, why does the city not want Target to walk out the door? Revenue. So the city says, well, let me see if I can work something out for you. If I can work something out for you, would you be willing to build your business here? Well, yeah, I just want to buy the land and build a Target. We'll make something work. Don't you worry. I'll be in touch. The city can decide that the extra 1.5 acres is urban blight, declare it so, declare eminent domain, clear out that area, and sell it, and then sell it off to Target. They've been known to do that. It's not always the business that initiates eminent domain. The business can go anywhere. If 4.5 acres isn't enough in India, they'll go and build somewhere else. It's not a big deal to Target that they didn't have that location. They could get another one. They're still making their money. They're not poor. They're not going bankrupt because they don't have this location. They want to expand. They want to grow. They want to grow their profits. So it's not like they're coming from a place of suffering. They're coming from a place of prosperity to begin with in order to expand. The idea that because there's eminent domain, it must be the business's fault is not always true. I'm not saying it can't be true. Certainly, businesses could ask the city to do that, and it might be expedient for them. But if you were to pull out the state, pull out the city and local governments, one, you wouldn't have zoning. You wouldn't have permits. And Target would build within its designated area, and all that you would have or wouldn't have is that prescribed buffer zone that the city was talking about between the business and the residential area. You'd have back-to-back private properties, adjacent with each other. A house could very well be adjacent with a business or a parking lot, right? Haphazard as that may sound, there would be no eminent domain. There would only be the business coming in and offering fair market value for a piece of property from a private owner And that owner could either say yay or nay. If they say no, then I guess it's no, right? That's it. There is no compelling the person to get off their property. There is no, well, you're going to take this check and be on your merry way, or underpaying or undercutting or declaring your house condemnable. There's none of that. There's just business. There's just free and peaceful trade. So if we took the government out of the equation, Target could still build if it wanted to. It would just figure out how to build on the 4.5 acres instead. And it would have been fine with that, right? If that was already a viable plot of land, then all they had to do was say, okay, well, I'll just build it here then. I'll buy the land and build. But nobody just goes and buys land and builds. Walmart can't do that. Target can't do that. And to say, oh, you're using the state. You're in cahoots with the state. Well, of course they are. They're as much in cahoots with the state as you are when you use the roads. They don't have a, I mean, it's not to say that that you know, poor business, poor corporations, but the rules are the rules. I mean, they're still going to get their permits. They still have to run it up the flagpole. They still have to go through the city to build, right? If you take the state out of the equation, how would these businesses perform? Who knows? Honestly, if you take the state out of the equation, you take corporate personhood out of the equation, do you really have such high risk expansion? I don't think you do. My understanding is prior to the institution of corporate personhood, people were fairly conservative and frugal about how they built and grew their businesses. Once corporate personhood came onto the scene and it became a thing for everybody to have, people were taking more risk. People take more risk when you're dealing with a structure called limited liability corporation. That's what it is. It literally limits your liability as a person. So once you take away the risk involved with expansion in business, you get big box stores, right? You can have big box stores. If a man had to tie his name to it, or if a certain, you know, conglomerate of partners had to tie their personal name and assets to that, and all the risks associated with that business, I don't think you would have the same kind of expansion. You would have more competition. You would have a far more robust marketplace. But circumstances such as they are, if you don't if you don't sign up for a corporation, your ass is on the hook in a very litigious society, and it makes no sense not to do it. If you don't trademark and register your trademarks, if you don't copyright your things, if you don't do these things, it's fine that you don't, but somebody else will. And then you're going to be basically eked out of your own idea. So the idea of, you know, playing Gotcha-ism with people who, if you don't do it, you could be potentially screwed in the future, right? If you don't use the road, you don't get to work. If you don't run it up the city flagpole, you don't get to build your work site. If you don't, you know, if you don't go through these processes, if you don't register your business, if you don't get, you know, if you don't register your trademarks, if you don't do these things, if you don't pay to play, if you don't do these things, you can get screwed out of a lot of things that you've legitimately earned. You can get screwed out of your ideas. You can get screwed out of the money you've earned. You can get screwed out of a lot of shit. The government fosters a litigious society, then creates certain structures within it to protect you from that litigious society. And so if you don't play within the matrix, you don't play for long. I can't necessarily fault a corporation for playing the game. The system is unto itself fascistic and will punish those who don't play along. That's how it is. To say gotcha to a business that's, let's say I start a small business in a strip mall. That strip mall was developed by a person who is the who's the beneficiary of not corporate personhood, but eminent domain. Do we get mad at the small business owner for renting from that guy? Do we get mad at the developer who went to the city and just simply asked for permission and the city was like, yeah, I want the revenue, so I'll declare eminent domain, which happens a lot? I think there's a difference between going out of your way to get government benefits and simply going about your business and the government inserting itself into that. And I'd like to make that distinction because playing Gotcha-ism with people and with businesses who simply go about their business and go about their way and try to play by the rules so that they can just continue on their merry way. I'd like everything to be ideologically pure, right? But I hardly think that the United States is a place where that's possible. So I think the ideal is to get out of all of these entanglements with the state, to get the state out of our business, to get the state out of our lives, to get the state out of our day-to-day, get the state out of business, like as in actual commerce, get it out of those things and allow us the opportunity to see what a stateless society could be, right? But to tell me I'm not allowed to opt out, but I still need it is kind of silly. Whether you say that from an individual standpoint or from a corporate standpoint, a business standpoint, at the end of the day, if I don't have the opportunity to opt out, how do you know that I need it, right? I don't think Walmart needs eminent domain. I think the city is the greater benefactor of eminent domain than Walmart. I think, or any of these big box stores or any of the developers out there, real estate developers out there, they stand to gain something, but eminent domain is something that the city benefits from the most, right? Same with being able to control me through taxes. The city benefits more than I do. I spend per gallon almost 47 cents a gallon in the state of California for the most shitty roads I've ever seen. My little accent certainly isn't meant to be off-roading on Highway 15, but that's what it does. So, I pay for it, but I don't really get the best out of it. I can get to my sister's house. Does that count? I can get to work. I managed to get there. My shocks are probably dying right now, but I can do that. I just think that given the circumstances, there's only so many anarchic ways in which people can operate, and there needs to be a certain amount of leniency toward the fact that people will still operate within the system just to be left alone and just to continue to get to the next place in their life. All right? Have a good week, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.